The sound of distant artillery thundered across the frozen plains of Eastern Europe. Private Nikolai Sokolov, only 20 years old, crouched in a muddy trench, gripping his rifle so tightly his knuckles turned white. He had joined the Russian army with dreams of glory, but now, knee-deep in freezing water, surrounded by fear and chaos, he realized the truth. This was not the war he imagined. The night before deployment, he remembered his mother's last words at the train station in Moscow. "Come back alive, Kolya. Promise me." He had smiled, confident and proud, in his crisp uniform. But that memory now felt like a dream from another life. A sharp whistle pierced the cold air. Incoming. Someone screamed. Explosions erupted nearby, shaking the ground. Mud splashed onto Nikolai's face. He threw himself against the wall of the trench as a shell landed barely 20 meters away. The noise was deafening. When the smoke cleared, he saw one of his comrades lying still, a boy his age, gone in seconds. That was his first day on the front lines. Round him, soldiers moved like shadows, exhausted, silent, and alert. The ground smelled of oil, blood, and burnt metal. They hadn't slept in nights. The cold cut through their uniforms like knives. Each man clung to his weapon, not out of duty, but out of sheer survival. At dawn, their commander, Captain Volkov, crawled into the trench with a grim look. "We move in 10 minutes. The enemy has fortified the ridge. We take it, or we die trying." No one argued. Orders were orders. Nikolai's hands trembled as he loaded his weapon. He wasn't sure if it was the cold or the fear. Maybe both. The thought of home, his sister's laughter, the warm smell of his mother's soup flashed before his eyes. Then, the whistle blew again. They climbed out of the trench. The battlefield exploded into chaos. Machine gun fire, mortar blasts, and shouts that vanished into the roar of war. Nikolai ran, heart pounding, bullets cutting through the air. He dug behind a destroyed tank, gasping for breath. Next to him, Corporal Dmitry Orlov, his closest friend, grinned nervously. "Welcome to real war, my friend," he said. Nikolai managed a shaky smile. "I thought I knew what it would be like," he muttered. "But this is hell." Above them, the sky was filled with smoke and fire. The ground shook as tanks rolled forward. The world around them blurred into one single instinct: stay alive. That night, when silence finally returned, Nikolai wrote in his small notebook, "I thought war was about bravery and honor, but out here, it's about fear and the will to live one more day." He didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning, the first taste of a long nightmare that would test not just his courage, but his very soul. The morning after the assault, a heavy silence covered the battlefield. Smoke drifted slowly over burnt machines, and the snow carried dark stains from the night before. Nikolai stood gripping his rifle, trying to stop the trembling in his fingers. He wasn't sure anymore if it was fear or the freezing cold. Captain Volkov gathered the squad. "We move now. Enemy drones are active. No vehicles. On foot." The soldiers exchanged hopeless looks, but no one protested. Orders left no room for emotions. The march began across wide, white fields where the wind cut like a blade. Snow crunched under their boots, each step heavier than the last. Nikolai lowered his head against the icy gust. The cold pierced through all layers of clothing, crawling into his bones. Beside him, Dmitry tried to laugh through chattering teeth. "You know, Kolya, I used to hate Siberian winters." Nikolai smirked weakly. At least there, nobody was shooting at us. They kept moving. The sky remained dark and heavy, and the world looked endless, only snow, shadows, and silence. Every 20 minutes, they stopped to check the horizon. Sometimes silence was more dangerous than gunfire. By midday, they reached an abandoned village. Wooden houses slumped under the snow, windows shattered like broken eyes. Inside one home, Nikolai saw children's drawings scattered on the floor. Rockets, stars, stick figures holding hands. Dmitry whispered, "War doesn't just kill soldiers, it kills stories." There was no time to rest. Volkov pushed them forward. "We must reach the river before dark. Enemy patrol spotted east. We keep moving." By afternoon, the snowfall turned heavier. Thick white flakes blurred their vision, turning soldiers into ghosts walking through a frozen void. The cold deepened. Their water bottles froze. Their fingers stiffened so badly they could barely grip their rifles. One soldier collapsed, knees buckling. Two others lifted him without a word. Survival here was a group effort, or not at all. As dusk approached, they reached a narrow river half frozen. Steam drifted out of the cracks in the ice. Volkov raised his hand. "We cross." Quickly and quietly, they tied ropes and tested each step. The ice groaned like a living creature. Halfway through, a sharp crack echoed across the frozen air. "Go. Move," someone yelled. Nikolai's heart exploded with panic as the soldier behind him plunged into the freezing water. Nikolai didn't think. He dropped his rifle and grabbed the man's arm. Dmitry grabbed the other. Their frozen hands burned with pain as they pulled the soldier out before the river swallowed him whole. By the time they reached the opposite bank, every soldier was shaking violently, but they were alive. That night, as they huddled in a hidden camp with a tiny fire, Captain Volkov spoke quietly, staring into the flames. "This march will break many men, but those who survive it become something else." Nikolai didn't know what that something was, but he felt the war shaping him already. Gray clouds swallowed the sky as Nikolai and his squad moved into a demolished industrial zone. What was once a busy factory district now looked like a giant graveyard of steel and concrete. Broken windows gaped like empty eyes, and the wind moaned through twisted metal beams. Captain Volkov raised his hand. "Stay low. Enemy scouts reported here." The soldiers spread out, stepping carefully through debris. Their breaths formed white clouds in the freezing air. Everywhere smelled of rust and burnt oil. Dmitri whispered, "Feels like this place is watching us." Nikolai replied, "Everything here is dead, except the danger." They reached a collapsed warehouse. Inside, beams lay across the floor like ribs of a fallen beast. As the squad entered, a single, sharp crack split the silence. "Sniper!" Someone screamed. Instantly, bullets ricocheted off metal, sparks flying in the darkness. Nikolai ducked behind a broken conveyor belt. His heart pounded against his chest armor. Peeking out, he spotted a flash. The sniper was positioned inside a half-destroyed building across the yard. Volkov barked, "Flank him." "Move." Dmitri nudged Nikolai. "We go right. Stay behind me." Nikolai nodded, adrenaline burning through the cold. They sprinted between shattered walls as gunfire snapped around them. Dmitri slid behind a rusted truck while Nikolai took cover behind rubble. Volkov shouted, suppressing fire. A storm of bullets forced the sniper to duck. Dmitri waved. Now, Nikolai steadied his rifle, held his breath, and fired. The sniper's figure collapsed onto the broken windowsill. Silence returned, but it wasn't peaceful. It felt like the world was waiting. The squad moved deeper into the ruins. Just as they entered an open courtyard, boom. A mortar shell exploded meters away, throwing Nikolai to the ground. Dust filled his lungs. More shells followed, shaking the earth, tearing buildings apart. "Take cover!" Volkov roared. Nikolai crawled behind a slab of concrete as flaming debris rained down. Beside him, Dmitri shouted over the chaos, "This is insane!" Nikolai gritted his teeth. "Keep your head down." The barrage lasted less than 5 minutes, but it felt endless. When it ended, the courtyard was a wasteland, walls flattened, vehicles burning, and several soldiers lying still in the snow. Volkov's voice cut through the smoke. "Help the wounded. Move." Nikolai and Dmitri pulled a trapped soldier from under rubble, their hands shaking from cold and fear. As darkness fell, they took shelter inside a half-collapsed factory. The wind howled through shattered windows. Small flames flickered from a barrel fire. Dmitri stared into the glow. "Kalia, if this is just one day, what will tomorrow be?" Nikolai didn't answer. Outside, distant explosions rolled across the night. The war was far from over. Night fell like a heavy curtain over the ruined factory. The wind hissed through broken windows, carrying the distant echo of artillery. Inside, Nikolai and the remaining soldiers huddled around a dim barrel fire, their shadows flickering on cracked walls. No one spoke at first. Silence had become their way of surviving the night. Finally, Captain Volkov broke it. "We hold this position till dawn. Patrols every hour. Stay sharp." His voice was steady, but Nikolai could hear the exhaustion hiding inside it. The firelight revealed tired eyes, shaking hands, and faces streaked with dirt. War didn't age men, it carved them. Nikolai and Dmitri took the first patrol shift. They moved slowly through the dark corridors, flashlights off to avoid detection. The factory creaked around them like an old ship in a storm. Dmitri whispered, "You hear that?" Nikolai paused. A faint sound echoed. Tapping? Or footsteps? The darkness made every noise feel alive. They reached the far side of the building where the roof had collapsed. Moonlight seeped through the broken ceiling, casting pale beams over piles of scrap metal. The wind fluttered a torn piece of fabric, creating the illusion of movement. Nikolai raised his rifle. "Could be scouts," he muttered. Suddenly, a soft groan came from behind a pile of rubble. Both soldiers froze. They approached carefully, rifles aimed. Dmitri pulled aside a broken slab of concrete and gasped. It wasn't an enemy. It was a young soldier from another Russian unit, badly wounded and half buried under debris. His uniform was torn, his leg bleeding. "Help, please," he whispered. Without hesitation, Nikolai and Dmitri lifted him out and carried him back to the fire. The squad treated his wounds as best they could. His name was Sergei, barely 18, a kid who should have been in school, not a battlefield. As Sergei drifted in and out of consciousness, he said, "They ambushed us. More are coming. They move at night." Volkov's expression darkened. Then we're not alone out here. Minutes later, the power flickered. A faint humming sound echoed through the factory. Nikolai grabbed his rifle. Drones, Volkov listened. No. Footsteps. The squad spread out. Shadows shifted beyond the broken entrance. Then, silence. A suffocating, heavy silence that made Nikolai's heart pound harder. A sudden burst of gunfire shattered the night. Contact! Someone screamed. Bullets tore through the walls as enemy soldiers stormed the factory. The squad dived for cover. Sparks exploded. The fire was kicked over, plunging the room into darkness. Nikolai crawled behind a machine, adrenaline surging. Dmitri slid beside him, breathing hard. Kolya. This is it, he whispered. Nikolai steadied his rifle, eyes locked on the shadows moving closer. The night had come alive with death, and dawn, if it ever came, would decide who survived.
Dawn arrived gray and cold, the horizon barely visible through smoke and fog. The factory was a battlefield of shattered walls, scorched floors, and lingering acrid smoke. Nikolai's squad counted their numbers. Fewer than half remained. Every face told the same story: exhaustion, fear, but also an unbroken will to survive. Captain Volkov's voice cut through the silence. We hold this position. They want us out, we fight. The enemy had surrounded the factory overnight, their presence now obvious in the morning mist. From shattered windows, silhouettes moved like dark phantoms. Mortar fire intermittently shook the ground, sending clouds of dust and debris into the cold air. Nikolai checked his rifle, heart pounding. Dmitri, beside him, tightened the strap on his helmet. This is it, he muttered. No retreat. Nikolai nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. Every step, every breath would be a fight for survival. Suddenly, a hail of bullets tore through the broken wall nearest to them. Nikolai and Dmitri dove behind debris as sparks and splinters rained down. Volkov shouted orders over the chaos, directing the few remaining soldiers to strategic positions. Hours passed like minutes. Each attack was relentless. Nikolai fired, reloaded, and fired again. He saw comrades fall beside him, some he had laughed with, others he barely knew. The battlefield had erased all distinctions. Survival had replaced camaraderie as the only law. At one point, Dmitri's leg was grazed by a bullet. Nikolai dragged him behind a wall. We make it through this, he said, though even he wasn't sure if it was true. The enemy pressed harder, yet the Russian soldiers held. Every corridor, every broken room became a fortress. And then, silence. The enemy retreated temporarily, leaving the factory eerily quiet. Nikolai surveyed the destruction, shattered concrete, blood-soaked floors, and the bodies of those who had fallen. For a fleeting moment, he felt the weight of what they had endured. Captain Volkov gathered the survivors. You've done what most men could not. You've survived the night, and you've survived each other. Remember this, courage isn't the absence of fear, but acting despite it. Nikolai knelt beside the remnants of the barrel fire, staring into the dying flames. Dmitri sat beside him, exhausted but alive. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the small notebook he carried since the first day. On the page, he wrote, "Greater than I thought war was about honor. It's about endurance, fear, and hope. Today, we survived it all." As the sun slowly pierced the fog, the factory, a ruin of steel and stone, seemed almost peaceful. But Nikolai knew the war would continue. Battles would come and go, but the lessons of this front line, this night, would remain etched into his mind forever. He stood, rifle in hand, looking toward the horizon. This, he whispered to himself, is what real war looks like.